what we need to perhaps look at is sort of redefining purpose in order to entice people back to, what was it about the job that made you feel like you were giving something back, that you were adding value to yourself, to your family, to other people. We prevent ourselves from doing the difficult thing. All it will do is make us feel less confident at that thing. Whether it's, I don't know, asking out a girl, speaking in public, going for the job interview, staying at nursery school in those 30 minutes.
Yeah.
That's the only way we increase our confidence. So a big part of happiness is feeling that I can be in the world, even when things aren't perfect, and I can be safe and okay.
I'm Farah Shammas. Welcome to Hotel Talk. We hope you enjoy listening to this friendly conversation between people connected by real life in hotels. Hi everyone. Today I'm on Zoom, so we're not doing this live, unfortunately, because our guest is not in Cyprus currently, even though she visits a lot. Her name is Dr. Linda Papadopoulos, and you might know her from Big Brother, Netflix, her books, and so many more different areas that she's in. She is a very well-known, famous, and very interesting psychologist who delves in many parts of life and psychology. Linda, thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, it's lovely to
sharing
see you,
some interesting insights.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Linda, obviously we want to rack your brains now and talk about the psychology behind hotels and mainly behind what makes us, which are our people and our employees. And what we found very much that happened during the pandemic is that people are in hotels and in hotel business because it's a way of living. They love what they do and they love how they make other people feel. And during a 2-year instability and lockdown, they were at home, they weren't doing what they love, they weren't feeling their sense of purpose, and they were just remembering the negatives and maybe, people complaining or bad days or the hours they have to work or not being with their family on weekends or on holidays. And it was quite easy when they were in that kind of downward spiral to be pulled out of the industry, which is it's known for not being a highly paid industry. And hence, so many people decided we're not coming back into it. So I'd really like to discuss that, get your take on that, and maybe talk about how maybe we can entice some people to come back into the industry and, what you think about everything I just said.
Yeah. Look, I think you're raising something that certainly I think people in the hotel industry, but I think in many industries saw, which is the kind of the great resignation, as it were. So I think what happened with the pandemic to a large extent, I think it not only did it blindside us, right? Because in many ways it was sort of the holy trinity of anxiety. There was the uncertainty of, what is this? We didn't know how long it was going to last. It was novel. So we were, constantly sort of foraging information about this scary thing. And we couldn't really think about anything else. And then it was a threat. And threat's an interesting thing because the more deadly something is, the more a threat it is, the bigger our brains make it seem in terms of the possibility of it happening to us. So we're feeling that this horrible thing's going to happen. So all of a sudden, the things that, like you said, gave us routine, grounded us, right? Getting up, going to work, going to the supermarket, all of these really basic, mundane things in some way, but also things that grounded us, they kind of seemed really unimportant. And then we kind of come out of it and people have a new routine, right? So it's not anymore getting up and taking the kids to school and going to work. It's whatever they've been doing for 18 months. And actually, when they begin to think about work, in many ways, because a lot of that fear is there, especially if the job was something that they had to kind of, that tired them, right? So they had those ups and those downs. Their brain is more likely to then focus on the downs. And I think it's interesting you say about the hotel industry, because I've known you for years. I know how much, I think you love your hotel, love sort of coming to see you. And I think part of it has always been the people. I think that's part of who you are. You've got this infectious smile. You've got this, but that's something that I think comes from the family of do you know what I mean? And by family, I mean sort of those surroundings it's imbued. And I think if you're away from it for a while, it's much easier just to remember the negative experiences, the tiredness, what's going on. So I think that will have been hard, right? To kind of entice people back. And I think the other side, of course, is purpose. I think when people begin to feel, well, what's the point? That becomes difficult as well. So I think what we need to perhaps look at is sort of redefining purpose in order to entice people back to, what was it about the job that made you feel like you were giving something back, that you were adding value to yourself, to your family, to other people. Those are the conversations that need to be had.
Definitely. I had one member of our team. He was amazing. He was in front office, and he was quite close to retirement anyway. So that also played a role. And, he just said when the pandemic finished, I don't want to do this anymore. And all he could remember was guests complaining. And when I personally called him and said, come on, just come back. You've only got a couple of years and, we need you and you're part of this family that is St. Raphael Resort. He was like, no. And he was just so stuck in his head about, the negatives. And he'd spent 40 years of his life loving what he did. And it was really sad to see that happen. But I'm a firm believer if at any given time, if you say, I don't want to do this, and you can't find an immediate solution, then yeah, you need to get out. So, I wished him the best and, we parted ways, but he didn't even go back to work at all. And many people who have said, okay, well, we've got to come back because we've got to come back. They didn't immediately come back and were positive or reminded how much they loved it or why. But given 3 months, given 6 months, however tiring the job is, I have seen this huge change, this huge shift in culture. And they have literally, they're smiling now. They're saying they love it. They're saying the best reward is the guests coming to them and telling them thank you. People giving them a hug and saying that they've made their holiday. And it's so nice to see that happen and people to feel, enthused by what they do.
But this is the thing, and I think this is what we're increasingly seeing, that I think we kind of fetishize notions of what happiness is in society, right? And I think there's other things that are really good for us. I think happiness is not a state that you reach and you're there. I think happiness is caught in moments, like you say, right? Whether it's putting your kids to bed at night or having a hug from someone that, wants to thank you or whatever the case is. But beyond happiness, there's things like seeking purpose, connection, seeking meaning. There's a brilliant... she's a happiness researcher. I think her last name is Coogan. I've got to check. I think it's Natalie Kogan or Coogan. She's sorry for getting the name wrong if I did. But she speaks about this wonderful study where they looked at job satisfaction amongst hospital porters. And they just asked one question. So really, really simple. She basically, they asked this one thing. They said, what do you do for a living? Now, those porters that scored quite low on job satisfaction said things like, oh, well, I move patients around, I take out the trash, I give people directions, I do what has to be done. Those porters that said they really like their jobs, they had a lot of job satisfaction, they answered like this. They said, I help people. I help make people's stays easier. I make it easier for the families to kind of find comfort there at this difficult time. So they're both doing the exact same job, but the difference is the meanings they ascribe. And I think in the same way we speak about this in any aspect of life, it's important in all of our jobs. Look, I think, no matter what we do, there's times when jobs are hard. There's times when they're easier. There's times that, that it's immediately easy to point to the thing that's wonderful and to point to the thing that's difficult. What matters is the meanings we ascribe. And what they found is with the group that was more positive, they did something called, I think it was called job crafting as well, which meant that they kind of took that piece of what they did further. There was one of the porters that would write letters to a family every month because of one of the comatose patients to kind of tell them what was going on. There was no other, there wasn't a financial incentive. There wasn't anything. And when asked about this, he was like, well, of course I would. It's part of, the reason that I love this job. I get, to add value to people's lives. And I think this is something we could all take away from, regardless of what we do, because just like happiness, that satisfaction is in a job, I don't think it's something that falls into our laps. It comes when you find meaning, when you get good at it, when you kind of get through the difficult stuff. And I think this is a conversation, and understandably this conversation wasn't being had because we need to keep people safe during the pandemic. And even now we're trying to figure it out. And I do think that, I'm delighted people can work from home. I think that, this hybrid model works well depending on your life stage. But I don't think it's a good idea for people to not re-enter the workforce. As a psychologist, I kind of think whatever you do, we're social beings. We need that connection. We need that kind of back and forth.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And how do you think management, if a manager is listening to this now, how can they help shift that sense of purpose, shift the culture that maybe has gone a little bit rotten? How can they help their team to reignite that feeling?
I think there's a couple of things. I think managers need to first start off by listening. I mean, you said, very poignantly in the beginning, and I think critically, that people's minds are orientated to what they don't like in the job. And so that's an important piece of the puzzle. Great. How can we address that? Because maybe some of it is inherent into the job, but maybe some of it we've learned now that we can shift systems, we can change things. So the idea of being listened to, especially in hierarchical relationships, sort of the manager to the employer, I think is critical. And by listen to, I don't just mean lip service. I mean, great. Let's listen with problem solving in mind. Let's see what we can shift. The stuff that we can't, let's kind of talk about if this is if there's something that you can do adjacent to that that fits your skill set. So this idea of kind of ensuring that people are able to have their say, and they're able to tweak, to move around, to kind of find something that's more theirs. The other thing that I would do is I would do regular check-ins. It's like a relationship, right? Why do we have date nights with our partners? Why do we sit down every day and have a meal with our families? Why do we say how important this is? These are check-ins. Again, it's the rhythm. So again, your relationship at work with your co-workers, your employer, your employees, you need those regular check-ins. So make those weekly, monthly, at least, so you're able to see where people are at. Make those solution focused. Again, I think having worked in this area, sometimes it just becomes a place for people to kind of dump stuff. Fine. That's the problem. Let's move to the solution. Let's kind of figure out something together. And I think finally, and really critically, engender a sense of belonging. You are asking people to be away from their families for 8-10 hours a day, to possibly do something where the money, they feel, well, if I was, this is depending on the country that you're listening to this in, but there's some generous government benefits. And so there's this sense of, should I stay home and do this? And these are honest questions, and spend more time, not stress. Why would I go to work? So kind of the benefits of it around it, and again, the fairness around if and I think this is something we've come out with from the pandemic. We all want to go to our kids' Little League game, right? We all want to see that. So how can we integrate things into people's lives to understand that, that work-life balance is key from CEO to, wherever other jobs going on.
Absolutely. And as you rightly said, it's listening for people to feel part of a team, part of a family. And just like you invest in your family and you sit down with your kids and you say, how was your day? Or how can I make tomorrow better for you? Or how can we solve this problem? It's exactly the same thing in a workplace. It's not different. It's not a different dynamic. It's the same dynamic, just applied with different people. And I think that's something that many people do forget. I want to shift gear a little bit and go into the guests. So the psychology of the guests. I mean, I was asked to do talks during the pandemic and talk about the post-COVID guest. And I laugh at, I don't even want to watch this, Zoom talk that I did, because so many of us in the industry got it so wrong. I'm happy to say some of the things I predicted were right, but so many of the things, like we all thought, room service is going to be up, people are going to want to exercise in their room. They're going to want to stay away. But as you've pointed out just now, we are social beings. People came out of this pandemic and they don't want to sit in their room and have room service. They want to be in a restaurant. They want to chat to the waiters. They want to have a personal check-in. So we've seen a massive shift in the post-COVID, if I can say post-COVID, because obviously we're still in the, we're not out of the pandemic just yet. How do you see people's psychology towards travel and the travel industry going? And they still obviously have fears and worries. How do you see that? And how have you seen that maybe in your patients and friends and even in yourself?
I think people are desperate to get back to a semblance of normality, especially when it comes to the holiday industry, right? We put all of that on hold, and in the same way that we put work on hold, but work was the tough stuff. The holidays was the good stuff, right? So we were able to remember all of that. So I think there's going to be a real need. I think the problem is going to be the logistics. Anyone who's traveled this summer has seen ridiculous queues, has seen prices go up, has seen I think there's been this very odd sense that I think you're absolutely right. I don't think anyone in the travel industry anticipated the demand, and therefore I think that was chaotic for a lot of people. So I'm hoping that by next summer that kind of balances out, because I think what you're hearing a lot now is like, this was literally one of the most chaotic times to travel, to find places. Things were very overpriced in some areas. And I think that left a kind of a bad taste in people's mouth. In terms of COVID, you will find that people don't want to think about it anymore. I think most of us want to feel like it's all gone, which is completely understandable. It was a collectively traumatic experience, right? So that sort of notion of wanting to relive it, that's not there. Instead, people want to pretend that it's completely 1,000,000% over. Let's hope it doesn't come back, and that it is, but and they want to move on. And as a consequence, I think that need to reestablish that rhythm of escape, of connection, as you say. And I'm delighted to hear but not actually surprised that people were saying things like, no, I want to use the gym, I want to go down to the restaurant, because again, one of the whole points of travel are those new connections, are those new surroundings. So the idea of traveling somewhere and just being in a room never made sense. So it's good to hear that that's what you're finding as well.
Definitely. The other thing we're finding is that again, if this is the right term for it, the post-COVID guest is much more demanding. Personally, I had anticipated people coming and just being so grateful to travel wherever they are in the world. I mean, obviously I see them here, but wherever people go, that they would just say, wow, we can travel. We've had this opportunity. We're just so grateful. We want to chat. But actually what we've seen is people who have spent, 2 years, maybe more, maybe a bit less, planning a trip or a vacation, and literally not in their head, not allowing for 1% of error, 1% of what's the right, how to say it now, any small blip in their perfect trip and holiday, they have literally gone mental in many cases. Some people have become neurotic on the precision and how they want everything to be perfect. Which has been quite interesting to see. It's been quite interesting from our side as hoteliers to see how we would and how we have had to cope with that. And most people have been okay in the end. But what's your take on that?
Yeah, no, look, I think what happened again is that people were, required to stay away from something that they loved. So they began to build it up in their minds. They fetishized it. It had to be perfect. It had to be ideal. So I think, there was probably a sense that that no matter what, they would have fallen short, because there was such an emphasis put on, when we get back to normal again, this is how wonderful it would be. And I think, this overcorrection will come back as well, because you remember, right? You remember, oh yeah, well, I always did have to kind of like, I don't know, queue.
Wait, yeah.
Yeah. I always, room service didn't come within, a minute after
5 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there possibly is a bit of that. And
pendulum will swing back.
It has to, because I think from both sides, yeah, we need to get some balance.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's good to know. So I want to go a little bit more generic now and talk about happiness. Now, I love your new book. I mean, you've been the author and co-author of, I can't even count. How many books is it now, Linda?
I think it's 9 or 10.
My goodness. Amazing, amazing. Huge congrats. And your latest one, or the latest one that I picked up, is one for children. And it's called Happy Confident Me. And we've got a copy and I love it. And I really urge anybody listening to this podcast to buy it. To be honest, not just for kids, even for adults, it's amazing. I keep on harping on about it to everyone I meet. And it's been a great, great, great book to do with my kids. So what makes people happy and how can we be happier? Because whatever line of business we're in, whatever we do in life, we're all searching for that sense of belonging and that sense of purpose and ultimately to be happy. So give us a few tips.
Oh, it's an interesting one because I think one of the first things that we need to realize is that in many ways, happiness, and I think we as I mentioned earlier, we kind of have this way of kind of viewing it that, are you happy? And yes, I can be, but I will be unhappy again. And that's okay. I think the first thing we have to conceptualize it is something that it's a state that we kind of move in and out of. And, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. So not to kind of feel bad when we're not feeling, absolutely wonderful all the time. And to also acknowledge very critically that other things in life that perhaps are hard are actually good for our soul, right? So we think of kids, and one of the things in the book that we speak quite a bit is this idea of how do you grow, how do you develop this growth mindset that Professor Dweck spoke about, and a lot of it is when you're uncomfortable, right? It's doing the difficult thing. We were just speaking before we started the Zoom call now about your little one, Parisa, like kind of dropping her off at a play school, nursery school. Yeah, and I think a lot of moms will get this, and little ones cry. They're like, "Oh, you're leaving," and actually, what you're doing by leaving is saying to her, "I know you got this." You're giving her the opportunity to self-soothe. I mean, it's tough, and I'm sure your heart is kind of breaking.
Awful hanging around, helicopter mom, yeah, and they're like, looking through the fence.
I know. I've been there, but at the same time, what you want her to see is that you believe that she can do this, that she can self-soothe and she can get there. And when she recognizes this, that's going to increase her confidence, because what you will take away from her, and this is true of anything, this is a very small example, but with anything, if we prevent ourselves from doing the difficult thing, all it will do is make us feel less confident at that thing, whether it's, I don't know, asking out a girl, speaking in public, going for the job interview, staying at nursery school in those few minutes.
Yeah.
That's the only way we increase our confidence. So a big part of happiness is feeling that I can be in the world, even when things aren't perfect, and I can be safe and okay. So that's a big part of it. The other part, I think, and this is why I miss beautiful Cyprus. I think so much of my family lives out there. Love London. Obviously, my immediate family's here and we have a great time. But when I go back there, it's these connections, and it's these sort of connections that I think transcend generations. So, I think a lot of people listening to this will be in urban areas, will often find if you don't have sort of that extended family, the kids hang out with other kids, especially with social media now. If you're 14, you speak to mostly 14-year-olds. And if you're 30, you speak to mostly 30-year-olds. Whereas back home, you have that quirky, older aunt or that grandparent that you speak to, or those little cousins that you hang out with. And I think all of that is really important. So investing time, as we've seen in sort of our relationships, in friendships, we know, in fact, if you want to predict longevity, one of the biggest predictors are positive social interactions. This, Farah, is good for our soul. Waking up, it's Absolutely. 9 a.m. where I am. So waking up and speaking to somebody and having a conversation that lifts you, that's actually really good. And it doesn't have to be deep conversations. Because speaking to your barista when you pick up your coffee in the morning, hanging out with the moms at school for 10 minutes, and when you drop off, speaking with your coworkers, these things matter. So if we talk happiness, we speak social interactions. And then the final thing that I would say with happiness, whenever someone sits in my office, I kind of check on the basics. I kind of say really, really simple things. How are you eating? How are you sleeping? How are you moving? these three things affect our mental health hugely. Sleep is a big one. We know because of technology and blue light that, people aren't sleeping well. This is a big predictor of kind of a developing depression and low mood. So getting a regular sleep cycle, really important. Moving. There's an abundance of research now. You don't have to, be in the gym for hours, but a half-hour walk outside relaxes that kind of prefrontal cortex. So we're kind of doing all that.
And with nature, how important is it to appreciate and see nature? Breathe in
So
fresh air, look at a tree.
So important. And we know now, we've got MRI scans that show that listening to nature sounds, being out in nature, relaxes that part of the brain, allows you that peace. And then food, food is a wonderful part of life, but making sure you're nourishing your body in the right way can have a huge impact.
Absolutely. Oh, that's one of my favorite topics, like giving your body that love that it deserves. There's no point eating a load of junk food and expecting your body to be able to function at its best. It's the same thing like a bank account. If you just put pennies in the bank account, at the end of the year, you're going to wonder, well, where's my money? I didn't save anything. It's not producing, it's not doing anything for me. But if you keep putting a decent amount in and really putting good money, 10 euros every time, 100 euros, which is the same thing with a meal every day. So have that apple, have that banana, have whole grain rice, have your legumes, have you're going to reap the benefit. I couldn't agree more on that one. So let's get personal. When you go on holiday, what do you look for? When you're booking a hotel, when you're choosing a destination? I know you come to Cyprus a lot, but what would you look for if you're going on holiday when you go?
When we go, we try and do different places. There are a couple of places that we love and we go back to. I go to the States a lot. I love the Far East, so we do the Maldives, we do Thailand quite a bit. But we do try and kind of mix it up. It depends. So if it's a winter kind of destination, it's a city hotel. For me, location's really important. And that, it comes down to kind of being somewhere. I love to walk around in big cities. And so that's kind of key. I prefer kind of, in terms of hotels, again, if it's a city hotel, I prefer a boutique. I love, again, the fact that you come in and people know who you are. I love that feel. I think sometimes big hotels can give you that feel as well. And then if it's somewhere tropical, it's very much about the hotels being in nature. I've stayed at some lovely hotel groups that kind of really sort of respect the environment that they're in. So that
absolutely, sustainability is so important now.
It's key. And look, service is lovely. Like everyone, you kind of think about that, that week or 2 weeks or weekend or whatever you're away for, and you want to make it, special. So I think a hotel that understands that, this is something that's special to you and kind of has those little touches often help. They don't have to be big. It's just those little touches that make you feel sort of, appreciated. I think that's very cool too.
Absolutely. That's what one of our other guests said on this podcast. I mean, nobody's staying in the hotel to sleep. They sleep at home. They're staying there for a purpose and they want the experience. And that's what we're here to offer. Linda, my dear, last question, which is a random question. So here we go. I have a list of, a pile, let's say, of questions that our team have put together. So I have no idea actually what they are. You can't pull one out of this hat, so to speak, but you can tell me where to stop and I'll pull it out for you.
Stop that. There you go. Stop there.
There we go. Okay, pulling out. Who do you look up to the most?
Who do I look up to? I've got to say, for me, it's my parents. Like they're really. I think there's a lot of people say this, but they're awesome people. My dad is 78 years old. He plays squash. I kid you not, 3 times a week with people in their 40s. He's amazing. He is hardworking, just so wise, so unbelievably wise. My mom as well, just they're good at life. She wakes up every morning, goes swimming, winter, spring, summer, or fall, has her little friends down there. It's, she again in her 70s, but just so funny, so positive. And I think I look at them and I kind of think, what makes people good at life? I think to a large extent, it's this ability to give back. They're both very generous with their love, with their time, and yeah, I think they're both definitely my my look up to. So.
Oh, that's so nice. I love that, being good at life. What a nice expression. Linda, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing some of your pearls of wisdom. I really enjoyed it, and I know the listeners have too. See you very, very soon in Cyprus.
It was a pleasure. Yes, see you soon, and yeah, big love to everyone out there, and yeah, can't wait to hang out with you and eat some of your delicious vegetarian meals. I'm cooking another one from your book this afternoon.
Well done.
Can't wait.
That made my day. Thank you, my dear. Lots of love.
Lots of love.